In this video, we're breaking down the most stupid Grand Canyon deaths ever recorded. From a passenger who stepped into a spinning tail rotor after a safety briefing, to a kayaker who ignored a warning about canyon walls and drifted too close until it was too late. It was July 14th, 2016, at Grand Canyon West, Arizona. The West Rim landing pad stretched across flat mesa rock beneath a wide, cloudless sky and dry desert heat. By 5:48 p.m., the sun had dropped low, pulling long shadows across the ground as a tour helicopter settled onto the pad, its engine still running and rotors turning. One of the visitors was Carla Nguyen, 34, a dental office administrator from Tempe. She ran a small travel photography blog with a modest following and had saved for months to book the helicopter tour. During the flight, she focused heavily on capturing angles through the window, carrying 2 cameras and reviewing shots frequently. Like the other passengers, she had listened to the safety briefing and read the card in front of her seat, instructions that emphasized staying forward and away from the rear of the aircraft after landing. The aircraft was a light tour helicopter with a conventional exposed tail rotor mounted at the rear. At ground idle, even with power reduced, both the main rotor above and the tail rotor behind continue spinning at high speed. The tail rotor disc, about 3 feet across, can appear almost invisible in direct sunlight. Its sound blends with engine noise and wind. The danger area behind the aircraft was marked by a low guide rope and explained clearly in the pre-landing briefing. Before anyone exited, the pilot repeated the standard instructions: stay low, move forward and to the left, remain inside the rope, do not cross behind the aircraft. 5 passengers followed those directions without hesitation. Carla stepped out last and initially walked toward the front as instructed. She paused to review an image on her camera screen while the helicopter remained at ground idle. The low sun settled directly behind the tail boom, washing the aircraft in strong backlight. After a few seconds, she turned slightly to adjust her angle and stepped closer to the rope line, raising the camera toward eye level. Passenger footage later showed her shifting position 1 step at a time, moving sideways along the pad rather than forward with the rest of the group. The main rotor wash lifted dust across the ground, and the tail rotor remained a faint blur against the light. From the front of the aircraft, a voice called out as she crossed beyond the guide rope. The pilot's view stayed limited to the left side of the helicopter, leaving the rear section partially obscured. At 5:51 p.m., she continued walking toward the tail, the aircraft still fully running. Within seconds, she entered the tail rotor arc. The blade struck the upper right side of her neck and shoulder at high speed, producing multiple rapid contacts in less than a second. Witnesses described a sharp cracking sound before she collapsed forward onto the mesa surface. The helicopter shuddered as vibration traveled through the airframe, and a rotor imbalance alert appeared in the cockpit. The pilot immediately initiated shutdown procedures. Emergency services were contacted without delay, and Hualapai Fire and EMS arrived on scene in roughly 22 minutes. Carla had no pulse on their arrival and was pronounced deceased. The medical examiner documented deep lacerations and blunt strike injuries to the right side of the neck, a fractured collarbone, and multiple upper rib fractures. The right carotid artery and internal jugular vein were severed, leading to rapid and extensive blood loss. Her cervical spine was fractured, and the spinal cord was severely damaged at a high level. The cause of death was listed as catastrophic neck trauma with rapid hemorrhage caused by contact with a rotating tail rotor. The manner of death was ruled an accident. Carla's blog remained online for more than a year after the incident, including an unfinished draft about the West Rim flight. Following the investigation, the tour operator updated exit procedures and added a second ground crew member to monitor the rear hazard area during passenger disembarkation. The rotor wash faded, but the pattern didn't. Months earlier at Horseshoe Bend, impatience with a crowded overlook led one visitor past the warning signs and onto a rim that was never meant to hold her weight. It was September 3, 2015, at Horseshoe Bend near Page, Arizona. The overlook was quiet in the early morning light. At the time, no guardrails lined the area, and warning signs along the approach advised visitors to remain near the main overlook at the end of the trail and away from unstable edges. The drop to the Colorado River below measured nearly 1,000 feet, and the sandstone rim appeared solid from above, despite its fragile layers. Aaliyah Brooks, 25, had driven in from Flagstaff before sunrise. She worked part-time at a budget motel and often chose isolated spots during hikes, preferring areas that felt less restricted than designated viewpoints. Friends said she sometimes ignored marked boundaries if she believed the safer areas were too crowded or controlled. She wore running shoes with flat soles and carried a small day pack with water and snacks, prioritizing comfort and mobility over traction or support along uneven ground. She reached the overlook around 7:10 a.m. Conditions were calm and visibility clear, but several small groups had already gathered along the main viewing area. Rather than wait for space to open near the main overlook at the end of the trail, Aaliyah continued past the posted viewing section, looking for a place where she could sit directly on the rim without barriers or other visitors nearby. Witnesses later told investigators she appeared frustrated by the crowded overlook, pacing briefly before moving farther along the edge despite warning signs marking the safer boundary. About 20 minutes later, she stepped beyond a cluster of signs and onto an unmaintained stretch of sandstone. From above, the surface looked flat and continuous, but the rock consisted of thin Navajo sandstone layers that naturally separated over time. Two visitors nearby noticed her scanning the edge as if searching for a place to rest. One person suggested she stay closer to the main overlook. Aaliyah gave a short, dismissive wave and continued forward. She selected a narrow rock lip that extended slightly past the main rim. The section formed a subtle overhang with little visible support beneath it. At approximately 7:36 a.m., she stepped onto the protruding area and lowered herself into a seated position facing outward toward the river. Witnesses said she shifted her weight once, leaning back slightly with her hands braced behind her. Seconds later, the sandstone fractured along a natural seam. The outer portion failed abruptly under her static weight. A sharp crack echoed across the rim as the slab separated inward toward the edge and dropped away. Witnesses described seeing her disappear almost instantly as the broken rock fell with her. Because the cliff face angled outward at that point, there were few opportunities for her body to make contact with the wall during the fall. She dropped nearly straight down toward the talus slope and boulder field below. Emergency services were notified at approximately 7:39 a.m. Due to steep terrain and limited access, both ground and air teams required several hours to reach the base of the canyon. Aaliyah was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner documented extensive blunt force trauma consistent with a fall from extreme height, including catastrophic head injuries, multiple long bone fractures, pelvic instability, and massive internal bleeding. Findings indicated death occurred at impact, and the manner of death was ruled accidental. Investigators later examined the failure point along the rim. The broken slab revealed a thin sandstone layer typical of overhanging formations in the area, not designed to support body weight. Rangers reiterated guidance for visitors to remain near the main overlook area and avoid stepping onto protruding rim edges, noting that the hazard itself had long existed. But the decision to move beyond marked boundaries created the fatal risk. The rim fell silent, but the pattern continued. 3 years later, another visitor stepped beyond the warnings, believing the rock would hold long enough for what came next. It was May 11th, 2018. Desert view on the south rim was dry and bright that late morning, with a light wind moving across the overlooks as visitors walked along the rim. From a distance, the edge looked firm and dependable. But beyond the maintained path, the ground was formed from weathered limestone that could split into thin, fragile shelves. Those fractured sections weren't reinforced, and a hard step near a crack could cause the rock to give way without warning. Standing near the cliff was Eric Dalton, 29, a warehouse logistics coordinator from Albuquerque who managed freight schedules and shift coverage. Outside of work, he spent hours scrolling through short viral stunt clips, often discussing bigger ideas for moments that would stand out on video. 2 months earlier, he had been passed over for a promotion, and friends later said he became more focused on doing something memorable outside of work, especially when a camera was involved. That morning, Eric arrived with his girlfriend, Priya Menon, and his co-worker, Davis Tran. Priya did not know he planned to propose. Eric carried a small ring in his jacket pocket and, after watching several proposal stunt videos online, decided to jump a visible gap along the rim and kneel on the far side while Davis recorded. They walked roughly 400 yards past the maintained overlook to a fractured section where two limestone lobes were separated by a gap just over 6 feet at its narrowest point. From about 90 feet away, a couple stopped and watched as Eric stepped back nearly 20 feet to measure his run. He approached twice and stopped at the last second, testing distance and footing. On the third attempt, Davis began recording, and another bystander lifted a phone, assuming they were about to film a stunt. Eric accelerated into a full sprint. His right foot planted inches from the rim lip. The limestone shelf beneath it failed instantly. A sharp crack echoed across the edge as a slab roughly a foot wide sheared inward along an existing fracture. The rock dropped under his weight. His planted foot fell with it, leaving him without lift. His body pitched forward and slightly right, momentum carrying him toward the far side without lift. He did not clear the gap. His hips struck the vertical face of the opposite lobe, folding him at the waist and redirecting his motion downward instead of across. His hands scraped against rock but found nothing to grip. He slid over the rim, torso first, legs trailing as fragments of limestone followed him into open air. Davis's recording captured the moment the rock broke, and Eric vanished from the frame. The second phone, farther back, maintained a wider view as he rolled out of sight. The fall measured roughly 200 feet from rim to talus. Witnesses reported seeing him strike the rock face once, then again against a projecting ledge before tumbling across broken stone near the base. His body rotated mid-air after the first impact, striking again at a different angle before continuing downward. Each impact altered his position before he disappeared below the rim line. Loose rock continued to fall for several seconds after. Emergency services were contacted immediately through the park network, and rangers dispatched search and rescue within minutes. Ground teams descended by established switchbacks before crossing unstable talus to reach him. Eric was found on a sloped field of fractured limestone, with no pulse or breathing, and death was confirmed at the scene. The medical examiner documented severe blunt force trauma, including major head injuries, pelvic fractures, and extensive internal bleeding consistent with a high fall. Investigators recovered the engagement ring from his jacket and reviewed both recordings as evidence. The fractured rim edge was photographed and marked to discourage access, and the case was closed as an accidental off-trail fall beyond a maintained overlook. Rangers noted the terrain hadn't changed, only the decisions had. 4 years earlier, the same park saw a different misjudgment, this time on a narrow trail where the danger moved on 4 legs. If these Grand Canyon deaths sound unbelievable, that's exactly why they matter. Subscribe and stay with us, because the next case shows how one careless decision can turn fatal in seconds. It was October 22, 2014. The South Kaibab Trail near Cedar Ridge was clear and dry that morning, and mule trains were moving on schedule. Rangers had already passed hikers, with the same reminder about standing still against the uphill wall. The rule existed for a reason. Among them was Sandra Bishop, 61, descending with 3 women from her hiking club. She had retired after 28 years as an elementary school librarian and prided herself on planning hikes carefully, often tracking routes and distances in advance. She had completed Bright Angel twice and trained for months with a weighted pack, which made her comfortable moving close to the trail's edge and around mule traffic. Sandra also had a habit of photographing working animals at close range. Her albums were filled with tight-framed shots of draft horses, ranch cattle, and sled dogs, and she often stepped closer than others to capture detail. That morning, she carried a compact point-and-shoot camera looped around her wrist, hoping to add canyon mules to her collection. Even after rangers repeated the uphill wall rule along the trail, she focused more on finding the right angle than keeping distance. By 9:40 a.m., the group reached Cedar Ridge. The trail narrowed to roughly 4 feet, bordered by a low stone lip on the outer edge and a steep drop beyond it. A string of 12 mules began climbing toward them, led by a wrangler guiding the string uphill. He gave the standard call to move uphill and remain still. Sandra and her companions stepped to the wall and waited. The animals passed one by one, panniers balanced, hooves steady against the packed dirt. The wrangler maintained spacing and watched the hikers as the line moved through. When the final mule cleared Sandra's position, The string appeared to have passed. The wrangler had already shifted his attention forward, guiding the lead animals around a bend in the trail. In that short gap, Sandra stepped away from the wall. One of her companions called her name, but Sandra raised a hand in a small, dismissive gesture and moved toward the rear of the last mule. She lifted her camera and closed the distance, positioning herself only a few feet behind the animal's hindquarters. The mule reacted instantly. Both rear legs snapped backward in a rapid double kick, hooves striking Sandra in the center of her chest and upper abdomen. Witnesses heard a heavy impact. The force drove her backward, lifting her feet off the ground and carrying her over the low stone lip at the trail's edge. She fell approximately 40 feet down a sloped talus face, striking rock before coming to rest on her back. Her body lay angled against the stones, one arm trapped beneath her torso. She made no movement. Her camera landed several feet uphill, the wrist strap torn free. The moment had been recorded twice, once in a photo just before the kick and once during the fall as the camera fired unintentionally. Emergency services were contacted immediately and the mule string was secured. National Park Service medics arrived by helicopter and hiked down with equipment. Sandra was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner documented paired hoof-shaped bruises across her chest and upper abdomen. Her sternum and multiple ribs were fractured. The fall caused a severe fracture at the upper spine, where the neck meets the chest, damaging the spinal cord. There was extensive internal bleeding within the chest cavity and significant head trauma from striking rock. The cause of death was determined to be fatal spinal injury and blunt chest trauma following a mule kick that forced her off the trail. The manner of death was ruled accidental. Rangers documented the incident as a reminder for hikers to remain against the uphill wall and avoid approaching mule traffic under any circumstances. 2 years earlier and miles away from the South Kaibab Trail, another safety warning carried the same clarity. This time, it wasn't about hooves and blind spots, but about calm water and canyon walls that seem harmless until you drift too close. It was June 7, 2013. The Colorado River moved steadily past the Havasu Creek confluence, green water sliding along sandstone walls that appeared calm from a distance. Near the bank, the surface looked smooth and slow. Beneath it, the current pushed with quiet force. Several boats were pulled to shore upstream. Leah Morgan, 31, was part of a permitted multi-day river trip that had stopped near the Havasu Creek confluence. She worked as a medical billing specialist in Flagstaff and often shared short live streams during outdoor trips, treating them as a way to stay connected while documenting the experience in real time. That afternoon, she planned to paddle briefly near camp to capture close views of the canyon walls for friends watching online. Leah owned a used recreational sit-in kayak designed for stable, flat water paddling. It handled predictably on calm stretches, but was not built for tight turns near rock, quick corrections in moving current. She wore a life vest, but carried no throw rope and had never practiced emergency exits in moving water. Along this stretch, shallow sandstone undercuts created sideways current that pressed silently toward the wall, even where the surface appeared calm. That afternoon, the group allowed a short paddle window, while rafts were staged downstream. Participants stayed within sight of camp. 2 kayakers drifted ahead, while Marcus Osi, 34, remained about 30 feet behind Leah. A commercial guide's raft was upriver within radio range. Leah's phone was mounted to her chest in a waterproof case, live streaming casually to friends. The calm approach to the wall was recorded, and what followed was captured as well. Leah angled her kayak toward the right wall, glancing down at her phone between strokes. The water beside the sandstone looked flat and slow. In reality, a subtle lateral current pressed toward the rock. That morning's safety talk had covered undercuts and the need to stay off canyon walls. Leah moved closer anyway, focusing on the view and the screen in front of her. Her bow made light contact with sandstone. The sideways push caught the hull and rotated it broadside to the flow. Once broadside, the kayak lost stability quickly. Marcus later said he saw the upstream edge dip and recognized the problem as it began. The kayak rolled. Leah entered the water on the upstream side and did not complete a clean exit from the cockpit. The inverted boat pressed against her as the current drove both toward the undercut. She surfaced briefly, pulling in air, then reached toward the rock to push away. Her right leg slipped into a narrow gap between submerged rock shelves, about a foot below the surface. The current forced her sideways and held her thigh tight between stone edges. Water pressure pinned her body nearly horizontal. She tried to pull free, hands scraping at rock as the current continued to press her into the wall. Marcus flipped as he lunged toward her and struggled free of his kayak before reaching the bank and signaling for help. Her hands broke the surface for only seconds, striking at the water before slipping under and not returning. Emergency services were notified immediately over park radio, and the call was logged shortly after 2:15 p.m. Rescue crews began moving toward the site, but entry required controlled positioning and active current before divers could safely enter the water. Rescue personnel arrived at approximately 4:05 p.m. Divers located Leah in 8 feet of water, still wedged by the leg. Extraction required prying tools to widen the rock gap enough to release her without additional trauma. Her phone continued recording until it submerged and lost signal. She showed no signs of life when brought to shore. The medical examiner found deep bruising on her right thigh consistent with prolonged compression against rock. Her fingernails were broken from scraping stone, and both lungs contained water, confirming active breathing during submersion. No heart defects or intoxicants were detected. The cause of death was drowning due to entrapment against submerged rock, ruled accidental. Evidence indicated she lost consciousness within minutes of being pinned, with no realistic chance of escape. The live stream remained online for months before her family requested removal. Marcus gave a full statement and later sought counseling. The outfitter updated its safety briefing to prohibit solo paddling near canyon walls and filming while maneuvering. Her study binder was found in her vehicle, practice exams highlighted and unfinished. Thanks for watching. If you like these stories, click here.